You're grinding every day. Long hours, no backup, no accountability. That ends now. The Empower Solopreneur Mastermind gives you one simple advantage: a weekly power session that turns isolation into domination. Every Friday morning on Zoom, you'll get real coaching and real feedback to make real moves. Join a group of driven professionals in a program designed for solopreneurs and people working at home. Stop getting stuck. Start scaling. Seats are limited. Lock in yours today at modernobserver.com/empower-mastermind.
A New Year's terror plot thwarted. Efforts to halt the war in Ukraine continue. The U.S. launches a tech initiative and more. Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and here's the news you need to know. Federal authorities say they disrupted a credible terrorist threat over the weekend, arresting 4 alleged members of a radical pro-Palestinian extremist group accused of planning coordinated New Year's Eve bombings in Los Angeles. The FBI stated that the members self-identified as part of a radical offshoot of the Turtle Island Liberation Front, an extremist group motivated by pro-Palestinian, anti-law enforcement, and anti-government ideology. According to the FBI, they were allegedly planning coordinated bombing attacks on New Year's Eve using improvised explosive devices, targeting 5 separate locations across Los Angeles. The agency said the 4 were arrested in Lucrine Valley, where they were believed to be preparing to test explosive devices ahead of the planned attacks. They have each been charged with conspiracy and possession of a destructive device. Ukraine has said it's willing to give up its aspirations to join NATO in return for security guarantees as part of a peace deal to end the almost 4-year war with Russia. Ukrainian President Zelensky offered to drop Kiev's NATO dreams during 5 hours of talks with U.S. officials Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in Berlin over the weekend. Witkoff said a lot of progress was made during the talks, which continued on Monday. Ukraine's offer marks a major policy shift. It has long coveted membership of the Western Military Alliance, whose members are obligated to consider an attack on one as an attack on all under Article 5 of the NATO treaty. Zelensky said on Sunday that the offer to drop NATO membership in return for security guarantees was a compromise amid resistance among some of its Western allies to its NATO bid. From the very beginning, Ukraine's conditions, or perhaps more accurately, our ambition, was NATO membership, and that would have provided real security guarantees. Some partners from the United States and Europe did not support this direction, he said in an answer to a question from reporters in a WhatsApp chat on Sunday. The European Union announced new sanctions on Russian oil interests, targeting people and companies that have helped Russian firms circumvent previous Western sanctions since the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The measure prohibits EU countries from doing any business with sanctioned entities. So far, the EU has sanctioned over 2,600 Russia-linked individuals and companies. The Australian Prime Minister said that he will propose stricter gun control measures in the wake of the Bondi Beach massacre during a Hanukkah celebration over the weekend. The 2 suspected gunmen, a father-son duo, were legal gun owners. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called the shooting an act of pure evil, an act of anti-Semitism, and an act of terrorism. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth will brief members of Congress on Tuesday about the U.S.'s military strikes in the Caribbean. While confirming the briefing, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called the Trump administration's bombing of suspected drug boats rogue and reckless. The Trump administration has launched a new federal initiative called the U.S. Tech Force, aimed at hiring about 1,000 engineers and tech specialists on 2-year terms to work on upgrading federal technology. The projects include artificial intelligence, digital modernization, cybersecurity, data analytics, and related technology projects. The effort, part of a broader push to modernize outdated federal systems and accelerate AI adoption, will be based largely in Washington, D.C., with salaries expected to range from $130,000 to $195,000. TechForce collaborators include more than 24 major tech companies such as Apple, Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, OpenAI, Meta, Amazon Web Services, and others, which have pledged to consider participants for employment after their service. President Donald Trump filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC on Monday, accusing the British broadcaster of false, defamatory, deceptive, disparaging, inflammatory, and malicious depiction of the president's remarks before the January 6, 2021 riots. The suit says the BBC intentionally and maliciously sought to fully mislead its viewers. The head of the BBC resigned last month after renewed criticism of the BBC's coverage. Ford expects to take a $19.5 billion hit from pulling back on EVs. The automaker said yesterday that its strategy shift away from electric vehicles and towards hybrids will reduce its profit in the near term. The decision to put its EV plans into reverse means Ford will stop producing an all-electric version of its signature F-150 Lightning pickup truck and will instead offer it as an extended-range EV that will include a gas-powered generator capable of recharging its battery. Ford CEO Jim Farley said the move away from EVs would ultimately create a stronger, more resilient, and more profitable Ford. Its EV business had already cost Ford $13 billion since 2023, per the Wall Street Journal. The retreat from EVs puts U.S. automakers out of step with Chinese competitors that are shaking up the industry by selling cheap electric models. That's the Raw Naked Truth for December 16th, 2025. You can catch every episode of the Raw Naked Truth Daily News Brief, as well as our sister podcast, Carnivore Radio, with news analysis and commentary, and the rest of the Xvadio Podcast Network at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcast app, YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.